Welcome to the Sheffield Sunday as Bill Sees It meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it is with much warmth and great pleasure that we welcome Bill S. from Cleveland, Ohio, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing or if you'd like to ask a question. Thank you, Bill. It's wonderful to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrew. Look at that. I set the timer for myself that way. I don't exceed my stay. My sponsor said if I come into your house and act like a guest and show respect, I'll always be invited back. And I've been invited back. I spoke here maybe a couple of years ago. I remember that day. It was very emotional. I get emotional now. Alcoholic, my name is Bill. I understand the hopeless diagnosis. That was in 1934, before Alcoholics Anonymous was in existence. I never know what I'm going to say. I ask God. Sometimes I think I shouldn't show up at these meetings and talk. However, those of you who know me know that I love the sound of my own voice. And that's not what makes me an alcoholic. It certainly doesn't help with recovery when you're perversely self-centered, but I want to take you to a time in about 1998. I've been coming to Alcoholics Anonymous for about 17 years. I hadn't quite made the team yet. Hadn't made the cut either, but I had made the team. And I burned another relationship to the ground. It was a good relationship, one that I really wanted to be in. I didn't understand what alcoholism was. I kept thinking that it had something to do with drinking. And every time I would stop drinking, I would get sober, and it would seem like life would just become just unbearable. But I had met this girl, and I fell in love with her smile. She had all of her teeth. She was definitely a keeper, but she never had a cavity when she smiled. It just lit up the room. She had an art gallery where they hosted for mentally and physically challenged, tested less than 61 IQ. My sponsor said that's probably why she took an interest in me. It made her feel right at home. And the funny thing about it is I decided that I wanted to have a smile like hers. When I went to the dentist and he gave me a $30,000 estimate, I decided that it would be easier for her teeth to go than for me to get mine fixed. Because that's alcoholism, right? I want to punish you for you doing things that got results and me not doing them, expecting the results. But I knew wouldn't be a good idea to knock her teeth out. I'd already been in court through domestic violence. That does not go over well. So what I did is I came up with my best thinking, and I started to hide her toothbrush and toothpaste. Now, you might say there's something wrong with that, and I suppose there is, but I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I shared that. And someone in the back of the room raised their hands and said, I understand that. I do stuff like that, too. See, I didn't understand that my thinking was the problem. That my thinking was always going to lead me back to the first drink. I had checked into a psychiatric ward, not because I felt that I was psychotic or needed psychiatric assistance. My car ran out of gas. It was in front of St. Anthony's Hospital. I had nowhere to go that night, and I needed some rest. So I checked in, telling them probably that I wanted to hurt myself or someone else, so they checked me in. Well, the next day I decided that I had changed my mind. I got enough rest, and I wanted to leave. And I tried to escape from this hospital. Orderlies were holding me down. And the psychiatrist, Gisa Laleva, came along. And she said, what's the problem? I said, I'm not crazy. I said, my estranged girlfriend has a grand opening for the art gallery tonight, and I want to be there. And I said, I want out of here. And I said, I am not crazy. I'm an alcoholic. And she said, if you can go upstairs and behave. It was a Friday afternoon. And it's very important because she gave me her word, and I don't trust people very well, and especially when I think that I'm always being tricked or whatnot. She said, if you can go upstairs and behave till 4 o'clock today, I will release you. I said, do I have your word? She said, yes. Do I have your word? And I said, yes. I even went upstairs and broke up with the girl that I got engaged with the night before because, that's always a good place to get a maid. And I behaved till 4 o'clock, and she kept her word. And as a result of my alcoholism, it's not substance specific. I do absurd, incredible, tragic things. I put things into my body, into my arm, into my mouth that don't belong there, that I would never otherwise do had I not been under the influence of alcohol and in the progressed and latent stages disease called alcoholism. I say that to say this. Sometimes I think the book tells us that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that someone else can be sitting in the shadows and say, I have what you have, and I want what you have today. So I've engaged in bulimia for about 30 years. That's what I call a lazy man's diet. That's where you eat all you want and you keep throwing up your food. I don't know that it destroys you from the inside out. I've been to the casino thinking that I was going to be the next World Series of Poker champion. That never worked out. I've gone broke there. You know, it's interesting when you gamble all your money away, even when you're sober, you can't be a real purpose to God and the people about you. Because even when it's time to do something that requires some finances, and you guys have taken care of me for so long, I wasn't able to do it. I used to loathe that about myself. Someone would come in and need help, and I would know that I should be able to help them. I was taught to help them. My mom raised 3 of us by herself. My dad had a disease called addiction, a little different manifestation than alcoholism. And I remember one time at about 6 or 7 years old, my mom came home and showed us $100 bill. Now, I didn't know what that was. I just knew that it had a lot more zeros than a $1 bill. And she said that someone had tipped her $100. I didn't know that that meant that the lights were going to be able to stay on, that the heat would stay on that winter. And apparently there was something called charity that takes place in the world where everything that we need has always been provided. I just don't know that. I didn't lose track of 1998 when I was in the psych ward, Andrew, I assure you. So she let me out like she said she would, and then I went on a tear, and the reason I brought up the other issues is I went down to the south side and started to smoke some high-powered sedative through a glass stem with Brillo. I don't know the recipe like Cat Williams says, I'm just saying. And I had one of those moments of clarity. I'd just gotten out of the hospital, and between this time, after I got out of the psychiatric hospital, and what had happened is they had kicked my lungs in down on the south side. I did not know that the party was over, but they informed me, all right. And I remember going to the hospital, and I thought I was having a heart attack, and what happened is my lungs were collapsed. And about 4 days later, as I came to and had these tubes coming out of my lungs, the doctor said, your lungs are at about 85% capacity. They will go back to 100% over time, not overnight, but there's nothing more we can do for you here. When you get out, you need to take care of yourself. Go get this antibiotic filled and take care of your lungs. You don't want to smoke cigarettes. You might want to stay in a healthy atmosphere, breathing wise. And I got out of the hospital. Let me tell you something, getting my lungs kicked in, coming out of a hospital with tubes in my lungs, or him warning me that does not relieve the craving that still existed inside of me, although I hadn't had no dope inside of me for 4 or 5 days, and it doesn't relieve the obsession of the mind. Like my sponsor says, alcoholism's like having sex with a gorilla. It ain't over till the gorilla says so, and the gorilla hadn't said so yet. And I went back down to the south side, and I got some of that high-powered stuff, and as I'm lighting it for the second time, I had a moment of clarity. And here's what the moment of clarity looks like. I said, this doctor just told me I need to protect my lungs because they were kicked in, and I'm over here smoking this stuff. I bought a pack of cigarettes in this high-powered sedative. We'll call it crack cocaine for lack of a better word. And as I'm lighting it, I said, I am going to destroy myself at my own hands, and I can't stop it. In the book, it says we learned that we had to I fully conceded to my innermost self that whatever it was that I had, that I was participating with destroying myself and had no power to stop it. That was a first step experience. The problem with a moment of clarity when I got another hit on the pipe is that I take another hit and the moment evaporates. I've got a window of opportunity to participate with the truth, but I don't have the ability in and of myself. And 12 or 15 more years of my life elapsed. We could get into that or not. I I went back to this doctor a few weeks later because I decided I wanted to do something about my problem, and I had a feeling that it had to do a lot more with alcoholism because I've been coming here for 17 years, and for some reason the illness would not respond to the remedy. I didn't tell anyone that I didn't follow the prescription. What I did is I sat in the meetings and hoped that I would get better. I sat in the meetings, wanted to hide the toothpaste and toothbrush from you because you took care of your teeth and I didn't take care of mine, living in the world of spiritual make-believe. Then God would just restore them if I prayed hard enough. I went back to this doctor. And I said, I want to treat my bipolar disorder. It must be that. Some people think I suffer from that today, but I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Only because my life seems to be better than it's ever been. And I met with this doctor 4 times, 4 weeks in a row. She didn't prescribe for me. And I said, Dr. Leba, I said, you haven't given me anything. Aren't you going to prescribe something for me to treat this manic depression? Now, she specialized in alcoholic and drug addiction, floor number 3, and then severe mental illness not brought about by chemicals, floor number 4. She ran the entire 3rd and 4th floor of St. Anthony's Hospital. One would say that she knew what she was talking about. She had credentials. And she said to me, Mr. Swan, in my medical professional estimation, I believe that you are an alcoholic and a drug addict, and if you do not go to Alcoholics Anonymous and take the 12 steps, you are going to die. It's a hopeless diagnosis from a doctor because I've been in AA for 17 years and something's just not working. I don't know what's wrong with me. It has to be something more than alcoholism. I did not know what it meant to be alcoholic. I didn't know that I was drinking because I couldn't stand being sober. And I always got sober. My good friend Bob D. was at Founders Day this weekend. What a phenomenal message. I never heard it put this way, but this is the story of my life. When I get and stay sick in Alcoholics Anonymous, alcohol and drugs begin to look like the medicine. And I always return to the medicine. Whether I want to or not, powerless over alcohol does not mean less power. It means none. And I had none in and of myself. I would get sober. I would get a job. I would try and put my life back together, which negated the second portion of step 1, life unmanageable. I didn't know that I couldn't manage. I thought it meant when I was drinking. My life had been unmanageable since the beginning. So here's this hopeless condition. And that's 1998. For those that have heard me before, shame on you for coming back and listening to me again, especially if you knew I was speaking today. But you know that I didn't get sober until 2022. If it weren't for the fellowship, the meetings, the members of Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't have survived. I got a guy in Chicago that said Bill Wilson couldn't have gotten sober with your type of alcoholism. Now, that doesn't make me special or different. It just means that there's something inside of me that's been trying to destroy me from the beginning. Before I ever picked up a drink, before I ever picked up a drug, I felt that was a state of hopelessness. The bedevilments of alcoholism have plagued my life since as far back as I can remember, all steeped in fear. You talk about a hopeless condition. And there lays Bill Wilson in the hospital from the reading today, and he overhears Dr. Silkworth telling Lois that she'll have to hand him over to the undertaker or commit him to an insane asylum for wet brain. And he said he kind of welcomed the former, the death sentence. He talks about it in sobriety, and I always used to read A Vision for You as if it meant when they were drinking, and they're talking about a sober alcoholic being dry for the moment, running around like a boy whistling in the dark saying, I don't miss it at all, and we say nonsense. Inwardly, you would do anything to take a few drinks just to take the edge off and get away with it. Just to take a few drinks and get away with it. Eventually, he will try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. And he will know loneliness. As few people do, he will be at the jumping off place and wish for the end. That's the hopeless state of alcoholism. The problem is when you come to AA for 40 years and the disease just doesn't seem to relent. That's a hopelessness beyond the hopeless condition, because if you're the last house on the block, it would imply that I've knocked on a lot of doors before I got to this one. And if my alcoholism does not respond to the solution that AA has to offer, I'm to be catapulted into a greater state of hopelessness. Why would I come back again? I was thinking about the other day, I'm sitting in a meeting in 1995 at the time down at the Rebos Club, and a guy came up to me. I was picking up another white chip. He said, I don't want you to try. He said, you have no willingness is your problem. And someone who knew what I suffered from said, you should have his willingness. He said, what are you talking about? The guy's been coming here 17 years, been in and out of 40 treatment centers, and he can't stay sober. She said, and he keeps coming. There's a line in our book that's so powerful that I think I hear it so much, maybe I'm immune to it. That God could and would if he were sought. Hopeless condition, my nephew lay brain dead on a gurney for 25 days as a result of an overdose of fentanyl. I remember coming back from Florida to Cleveland, I found out I got that phone call. I came back up there, and of course, my mind tells me that I'm going to walk into this hospital and I'm going to scream real loud, and I'm not afraid to do that because I wanted to do it when my grandfather was in that state 50 years prior, and I didn't do it. I always regretted that. What I didn't know is screaming doesn't bring someone out of a brain dead state. It just makes a lot of noise. But I went back, and I remember saying to the nurse before I walked into the room to see him on this ventilator and all these tubes coming out, and the only reason they had him on life support with a breathing lung is because he was an organ donor on his driver's license. And I was just looking for something. And I said to her, I bet you see a lot of miracles here. She said, I don't believe in miracles. I said, why not? She said, because I work here. There's that word again. She said, take no hope that little boy in that room next door is going to come out the door that he came in. He's going out that door, which is at the end. That's where they take him to the morgue. You guys told me there's one who has all the power. That one is God. Do I trust that power? I don't know. I went the other day, I shared this on a meeting, get transparent here. You can get naked in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the more naked you get, the better it is. Because a lot of people get free, and I get freer than I've ever been in my life. My sister called and said, I'm going to see Kyle and Allie. That's my brother's youngest daughter and second youngest son. And they both just had little boys. One was 7 months old, little Anthony, and then Oliver was 4 months old. And I told her, I'm going to a meeting. And then I like to give God the name something. You guys have taught me that. Sometimes his name is something. Something told me. Something inside of me. I saw something in your eyes. That's good enough for me. That's a good name. I think he responds to that too. Something told me, you're missing out on life. You've been to 7 meetings today. I think you'll be okay if you skip this one. So I gave myself permission. And I saw these 2 little babies in these cribs, in these strollers that they have them in. And I realized how fearful I've been all my life, that I don't get close to people. I don't let no one in because if something bad happens to you, I think it will destroy me. So I deny myself the opportunity to be alive. And the truth is that I can't do anything to protect those little babies. I have to trust the unseen. The one that I profess having a tremendous faith in, the one that has demonstrated for 66 years in my life that he's benevolent, he's all powerful, all guiding, omnipotent. He has everything, especially my best interest in mind. I don't know that I trust him enough. Here's a funny thing. They read about it in one of the other readings that I almost picked. Jessica read about it today in our home group. Fear, just don't have enough faith. Fear and faith, I believe, are the same thing. Fear is just faith in the wrong thing, in a negative outcome, in an uncertain outcome, in a scary outcome. So I tell myself a scary story, and I wonder why I walk around full of fear. Those little babies are helpless. They have to rely on those parents. And my mind said, well, what if they fell? What if they stop it? Where do these stories come from? Because they don't come from God. I have so many experiences that I could draw on to share where God has demonstrated, like it says in our book, his omnipotence. If trouble comes, cheerfully capitalize on it. She said, I don't believe in miracles. When I walked into that room, I knew that me screaming was not going to bring him out of that state. For 17 days, I went to that hospital every day, and I implored a miracle from this God that I can't see, the God that you have been telling me about all these years. Now, this is back in 2017. I've been seeing a lot of demonstrations. It's interesting when it's your kid laying on the gurney. I don't know that I'm as sensitive as when it's someone in our family. Nonetheless, I went there, and finally I went home, and I sat down on my mom's couch in front of her, and I collapsed, and I broke down and cried. I said, Mom, if anyone deserves the pain that's going to come when they pull the plug on this little boy, it's me. My brother lived a stellar life. My brother did what you're supposed to do in life. He trusted God. He trusted family. He believed in everything decent and worthwhile, and I took every shortcut and broke every principle that you could think of. And I said, he will never be right after this, because he had waited for that son for so long. He had a couple daughters, and God blessed him with this son. He wanted to be a state champ wrestler, and he put in the effort to do it. And we're going down to Columbus. It was amazing. Before we had gone to Columbus, we were at sectionals or regionals or districts. I don't care. We went all over the place. And he's got to win this last match, and then we can go down to the finals. And with 15 seconds left, he escapes, and the score's 1-0. I know we're going to states. I got so excited. I jumped on the mat. The referee said, if you don't get his father off the mat, we're going to disqualify him. They said, that's not his father. That's Uncle Fester. And he just got out of the psych ward. Better left. I was excited. I was happy for him. I was a part of life. We went down to state. I remember calling my sponsor and telling him the condition that he laid in. He said, that's a much bigger opponent than he faced down there in Columbus at the state wrestling. I collapsed in that thing, and I said, you know what, God doesn't do things on our terms, and thank God he doesn't. And I said, if there was a way, God, that you could transform us, I would trade my life for his, and not because I'm selfless. I had a little bit of love in me, and more than that, I looked at the truth. He was 25 years old, and at this time I was 57. I amounted to absolutely nothing in life. I had coming here for 30-plus years. I couldn't put together too much sobriety. God doesn't work like that. God doesn't do things on our terms, and thank God he doesn't. I called my aunt, who's a pastor. And I said, Aunt Cheryl, she kept telling us to go there and speak God's word over him. You know, and some people believe that, you know, God, we are the head, not the tail, above and not beneath, no weapon formed. All that crazy stuff they talk about in the church. Sometimes I think they're more delusional than we are, Tina. Because we say crazy stuff like this too so fast. Trust God, Cleet. Give me a break. I need a lawyer, not a big book. I said, Cheryl, it's no use, all this praying and going to the hospital and asking the people when they need to pray. I said, he's brain dead. The evidence is there. Here's the x-rays. She said the craziest thing to me. I thought she needed to come to AA. She said, who made his brain? I said, I don't know. I guess God did. Would that be the right answer? She said, that would be the right answer. She said, and either God will fix this one or he'll give him another one. I said, this lady's got to be crazy. The doctor came to my brother and said, listen, it's awful expensive to keep him in this condition. He said, I think we should take him off of life support. And my brother said, I don't care what it costs, I'll pay it. He said, I understand. He said, maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to take him off of this iron lung. But because his immune deficiency will be so great, his immune system will have shut down so much and be so contaminated from what's happened. Because what had happened is he laid in his own vomit for 4 hours. And he breathed in that asphyxiation. It wasn't even that the oxygen got cut off. It was poisoned. He says, if we could take him off of that iron lung, then he'll catch a common cold. He won't be able to fight off the infection. And at least with dignity, you can tell your friends that he died of natural causes. Hopeless condition. The doctor tells Bill or Lois, there's no hope. The doctor tells my brother there's no hope. But there is one who has all power. They don't teach about him in medical school, maybe. They don't teach about him at Towns Hospital. But there is one who has all power. And on day 25, God brought him back from the dead. He's just celebrated 9 years. He's the one who has that little 4-month-old baby, Oliver. And all those thoughts came to my mind, me thinking that his life was on life support. Now there's a baby involved, and how's he going to take care of? And all the stories I want to tell myself, which deny me the opportunity to live this thing called life. What I do is I come here and share with you guys that these are the things, these are the secrets I used to keep all the time. I didn't want no one to think I was flawed. I don't want you to know how judgmental I am of each and every one of you. No. I don't want to tell you that. I come to some meetings and leave because I think you're speaking more than me, and I don't think that's a good idea. Listen, I'm just telling you. The girl at our morning meeting said I was a general nuisance, a narcissistic alcoholic. I said, I feel right at home. Here's the problem with that. If you're speaking on these meetings so many times, God may have something that he wants me to hear. Why don't I listen? Because I'm an alcoholic, I'm obstinate, I'm self-centered, I'm judgmental, I'm critical, and those are my good qualities, Tina. I was thinking, Young, punish me. If you saw the lineup this month and he throws me in the mix, Peter M., who's chopping wood and carrying water all over the world, I don't even know if he knows where he lives anymore. He's in different states every week. You got Elizabeth B.L., got sober very early, carries the message, has been out with brilliant speakers. You got my good friend Terry F. next week, who speaks at conferences. And then right in the middle, got Young picks me on Father's Day. I haven't seen my daughter in 30-some years as a result of my alcoholism, as a result of a judge's instruction that if anything goes in me between now and our next hearing, he will take away my rights in her life. He wasn't kidding. I agreed to the term. But hopelessness and powerless over alcohol, the love of my daughter, the wanting to be in her, does not take away my alcoholism. In fact, it's just another consequence that's coming to put me in a state of greater hopelessness. I got a text from her last night. We haven't seen each other yet. God will constantly disclose. That's what he disclosed. I got a text at 12:11 in the morning. Happy Father's Day. And it dawned on me, maybe she's afraid to see me as I am to see her. Because what are we going to talk about? See, there were a lot of years I denied having any kids because it was easier to say that than to tell the truth, that my alcoholism had given me the inability to show up for court, and the judge never even had to take my rights away. I just couldn't go to defend them. I picked up a drink a day or so prior to my important engagement, like it says in the book, and I drank right through the engagement. I wasn't drinking, how does it say, to satisfy some emotional need. I put the first one in and couldn't stop when it was appropriate, stop when it was necessary, stop when I wanted to. I'm an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. I'm in the late and progressed stages of the disease of alcoholism, and I can't do nothing about it. And if you've been coming to AA for a while, you got sober real young, maybe a potential alcoholic, maybe even a hard drinker at the time, and you were able to stay sober as I was for an appreciable period of time. Here's how my alcoholism catapults me into a greater state of hopelessness. It goes back to what I did at 21 that worked for 3 years, or back to what I did at 29 that worked for 5 years. It doesn't tell me about the last 12 years of my life when I picked up a drink and evaporated 12 years after the doctor told me it's not a good idea for you to go. You need to protect your lungs. Tells me you know what to do. I remember getting on my third violation of probation, standing before Judge Nelson. He said, Mr. Swan, there's something about you that I like. I wanted to ask him what it was, so I could stay on his good side. But for the one time, my sponsor, my lawyer told me, shut up. And I listened. And I went home that day. He said, if you come before me again, I will be forced to send you to prison. Please don't force my hand. Oh, I didn't want to force his hand to you. Not at all. Went to an AA meeting, which is where I always went based on the new consequences. And I said, Claude, Nelson's going to send me to prison if I violate one more time. I said, I need to stay sober for the next 18 months and get this probation up off me. And Claude said this. He looked at me and he said, what you might want to do. And before he could complete his sentence, Kathy, I said, Claude, I know what I need to do to stay sober. And he looked at me and he said, if you know what you need to do to stay sober, you're screwed. See, it's what I knew for sure that wasn't working, that was killing me. It was my prejudice. It was my obstinacy. It was my belief that you were the problem, that if I could just get these consequences off of me, that would remedy my alcoholism. It's not a consequential disease. Those are just circumstances that happen. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think they separate us. Because if you ain't had your kids' rights taken away, if you ain't got 6 DUIs, if you haven't had your head or your lungs kicked in or got your teeth knocked out or something better on a Saturday night when you think it's a good idea to go get one more, then my bad behavior is probably not going to keep you sober any more than it did me. But if you understand what it's like to sit in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and someone says to you, when are you going to have 30 days? And you say, I'm working on it. I don't know, give me a couple months not knowing whether I just got back or getting ready to leave again. But I knew that I couldn't stay sober here, not for good, not forever, not permanently. That's a terrible position to be in. It's like going to the doctor, giving him the symptoms, getting the diagnosis, him giving you the prescription, and the prescription won't work. I didn't understand that the 12 steps that you see up on the wall or that you read at most meetings were nothing more than a description of the action taken by the people who wrote the book. It was theoretical when I said I'm part of the we. You guys always told me it was a we program till I had to go to jail. Then you said you're on your own, but here when you get out. You know what I'm saying? The deal is until I do the do, I'm not part of the we, I'm part of the them. I never got that. I could recite the book, I could recite the program, but I never let you know anything about me. I was thinking about it. They used to have this show on TV. I shared this at Bronx meeting one Sunday morning. They asked me there. It's called To Tell the Truth. Holy shit, the doctor says I can't. The big book says once in a while I may, but that's doubtful. And I said to myself, will the real Bill Swan please stand up? The book talks about the double life. I had so many stage characters, Stan, that if I had to pick myself out of a lineup, I wouldn't have got the right guy. I didn't know who I was, but I'll tell you what I vicariously lived through. You guys, I could tell stories that were moving about the miracles that I seen in Alcoholics Anonymous, but they were always it was like someone had wrapped me in layers of saran wrap. I'm sitting outside of the fishbowl. I'm sitting... How my sponsor said it, you've been standing in the river for 40 years dying of thirst. You've been asleep your whole life, dreaming you were awake, telling everyone how good the water is. What are you talking about? I had a first, second, and third step experience at 9 months and 3 days sober. I was 62 years old. I had a meeting with the Social Security Administration to take an early retirement. I wanted how much I was going to get. Come on right over here. Let's see. You made nothing. You paid nothing. You get nothing. Sign here. 2 new felonies, no driver's license, don't know where my teeth are. Living at my brother's house. No car, no hope for a future, no retirement, no 401k, B or C. None of that. And I wanted out of my life. And at 62 years old, what's the point? Why would I had no more fight left, Stan. I drank up my 30s, smoked up my 40s, shot up my 50s, gave up my rights in my daughter's life, my marriage, every relationship, everything of value. I couldn't even get a job. As a matter of fact, I think out of charity, they had a guy with Down syndrome and me wash the dishes, and they didn't know who was less ability to handle themselves, who had less of an acuity, I think out of 1. 2 days a week, 6 hours a day, and that was above my pay grade. And I came up with a plan to say, you know what? What's the point now? There's nothing left to live for. I didn't understand what alcoholism was. It was a separation from the power. It had nothing to do with drinking or drugging, except when I was drinking or drugging, I never got that. And here's what I never got about step 3. I always thought that it was incumbent on me to surrender. It tells me for 2.5 pages when we get to the third step after how it works. It doesn't tell me what God looks like. It doesn't tell me where he's going to be on Sunday, what his will is for me, who he wants me to date, if anyone. What it does is it spends 2.5 pages giving me a good idea that my life run by me is not working, never has, and never will. I'm on a long losing streak. My sponsor said, you know what they're going to do next year? The Cleveland Browns back in 2017 were 0-16. Larry said to me, next year they're going to fire the manager. Let's take a look at who's been managing your life, and not by design, but by default. It had to be me. Why? Because there was no one left to blame. I drank them up. I smoked them up. I used them up. I was expensive to love. No one wanted nothing to do with me. And I can't say that I blame them. I remember David Hollister, as long as I'm alive, David will be alive. For 30 years, he did everything in his power to get me sober, everything shy of shove a big book down my throat. And I did to him what I did to everyone who ever tried to help me or love me. I lied to him. I stole from him. I talked bad about him, started rumors about him. It didn't matter, because when I'm sick of soul, you look sick to me. I'll tell you something else. I kept turning my will and my life over to his care. And when you do that, you hate the caregiver. I've got some independence today. Thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. For 30 years, he did that. He was a Vietnam veteran. I said, how did you survive Vietnam? And he said, certainly by God's grace. I said, you never got lost in the jungle at 19 years old. They dropped you out of a helicopter in a foreign land where you've never been. He said, it's real simple. He said, I had a compass. And he said the compass always pointed north, so I was never lost. And it dawned on me, that's what we agnostics is about. Deep down in every man, woman, and child, by divine design, has been placed a compass that always points to God. Now, I may feel I'm lost, but like Ralph said yesterday, he hasn't lost my address. He doesn't not know my name or where I'm at. Gently, lovingly, he's been guiding me. But at the end of step 3, it says, guess what? If you're going to surrender, you can't do it on your own. You have to have God's help. I never got that. I'd come in and say, this time I mean it. This time I'm going to do better. This time and I would mean it. I would come back to AA and say, I'm going to try harder. I never knew that my trying harder was part of the sickness, never part of the solution. No matter how great the necessity or the wish, I can't stay sober on my own power. I have to have God's help, and I'm so blocked from God because I'm steeped in me. What happens is I got to the point where I did something more against my nature than check out. I allowed God to come in and take my life. I was homeless for 33 years in a row. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't living on the street. I'm not that tough guy. I'd like you to think I was, but I wouldn't survive the street. I slept on your couches, on your front lawns in your cars, treatment centers, psych wards, jails, my mom's house, my brother's house, my sister's house. Homeless for all those years. There's a line in the book that's so powerful. It says, we realize when we look back, the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could conjure up in our minds. 3 years sober, my brother went out and bought a house. He said, here's where you're going to live. How do we say it? Early risers, look at God. You can't believe what's happened in my life. I couldn't even begin to tell you in the last 4 years if I knew that my life would be this good had I just given it up. Just come in here, ask for help, let you help me, and let you help me on ways that were not my own. My God, how good my life would have been, but my thinking was backwards, and I'll say that before we end. The 4th step is so powerful, because what it does is it lets me think you're the problem till I follow the instructions and find out it was never you. In fact, some of you never even existed. My sponsor said the worst things that ever happened to me never took place. I made them up in my head and then looked for evidence to support my delusion. I always found what I'm looking for. Well, if you're not my problem, but I think you are, and I'm taught to believe that God's beyond the clouds, what if he's not beyond the clouds at all? What if he's in the last place that I'll look in the final analysis? What if I find out that God was deep within? I love to always share this. I looked up The Wizard of Oz one day. It came out in 1939, August of 39. I said, that's interesting. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous hit the press in April of 39. I said, can you imagine if God was trying to talk to us rather than behind the pulpit with a collar, but in books and poetry and music and stories? People. What if when the end that the lion, the scarecrow, and the tin man got behind the great and powerful Oz, something they couldn't see till the doggy exposed them and said, guess what? You're wrong about that too. He said to them, what you came here for, I've got bad news. I don't have it. But I've got some real good news. What you're looking for has been deep within you the whole time. How that's the message of AA. If you're looking for God, put down the telescope and pick up a pen. He's not beyond the clouds. He's hidden deep in our heart. And all we got to search diligently, lay aside prejudice, and join us on the broad highway. Thanks for having me.